You're listening to If Only I Were Wiser podcast, where Raina Wilson brings together wisdom and raw life stories to provide encouragement and truth. So many times it's easy to become discouraged in your own pursuit of health because your story or circumstances look drastically different from your favorite influencer or even the expectations you had for yourself. If that is you, welcome! This space is for you to learn, breathe, and maybe just listen and see what wellness could look like for you. Hey friends, welcome back to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast. On today's episode, we're talking all things boobies and breastfeeding with Lindsay Stipanov. Lindsay is an ex-ER nurse turned lactation consultant because of her experience with her first child. In this episode, we touch on all things nursing, everything you wish you had known from your lactation consultant. And just a heads up for this episode, I had a little bit of trouble connecting with Lindsay after this interview, but in the heart of sharing all things wisdom here, I wanted to continue to publish the episode because it's so rich, full of information that I still wish I were wiser when it came to all things nursing, prenatal, and postpartum. So let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome, Lindsay, to the If Only I Were Wiser podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so ready for this conversation all about boobies, mamas, all the good,
good stuff.
things. So I would love to just introduce you to our audience. Can you share a little bit about you? What does your family look like? And then we can dive into how you got started in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here. I'm honored that you wanted to have this conversation with me today. So I am Lindsay. A little bit just about me and my background. I am a nurse, but more importantly, I am a follower of Jesus. I am a mama. I am a wife to my hunky firefighter. We've been together. We were just talking last night, almost 10 years. And we
Wow.
I know, it's crazy. I'm like, how has it been almost 10 years? And we have two kids, a 4-year-old son, and our daughter will be 2 in just a few weeks, which is crazy. And yeah, that's what our family looks like. I work very part-time and get to be a mostly stay-at-home mom with our kids. And that is just such a blessing because that was a dream that I had had for so long. So I still get to work and I do enjoy my job. And then I get to be home mostly with our babies.
Yes, I love that. So for many women, it all starts with their birth, their story, their relationship with their kids, and what postpartum looked like for them. So was that the same for you getting started for Latch and Lactation Co.? Or kind of what did it look like for you to get started?
Yeah, so before I had kids, like when I got pregnant with our son, I knew I wanted to breastfeed. Like I was like one of those people that was like, I am breastfeeding. I am super passionate about breastfeeding. Like I was like always a breastfeeding advocate. Like I could not wait. Like that was one of the things I was most excited for. So in true Lindsay form, as my husband would say, I got all of the information. I took the classes. I did all the research and like I was ready. Like I went in there feeling so confident and ready that like we were going to rock this breastfeeding journey. And also there was a part of me that just felt like it's breastfeeding. Like God created this. Like it's just natural. It's just going to happen. Like there's not going to be like anything hard about it. Well, then that was a rude awakening when I had my son, and breastfeeding was a struggle. And that is an understatement. It was just grueling. And fortunately, I'd already had a lactation consultant that I had been working with because she was the one who did our education, our prenatal breastfeeding education class. So she was already on speed dial and she worked with us regularly. And I just kept thinking like how hard this was for me, someone who was educated, who had all the information and had all the resources at my disposal, and how I still some days felt like I was just going to throw in the towel. And I was like, I don't want moms to feel like this ever, like to feel unsupported, to feel like there's something wrong and they don't know what to do, or maybe just acknowledging that this is normal and this is how breastfeeding is, because you hear so much misinformation all the time. Like you go to a mommy Facebook group and people are like, oh yeah, that's normal. It hurts like that. My nipples bled for 3 weeks. Like it'll get better. And so you start hearing all this misinformation. And I was like, I want to be a person that can combat that misinformation and provide support like I had. And with my background in nursing and education, like it was just kind of a seamless transition to get started in that space.
Absolutely. So it was the same kind of for your second child, or would you say that you walked in a little bit more prepared?
Yeah.
Even just like expectation wise.
For sure. So I was prepared. So my son had a very bad tongue tie, which was a large part, plus a traumatic birth. And so that was a large part of why we struggled, because he had like no tongue mobility, and very poor like jaw function. So like I understood, like I started to understand, once we worked through his issues, why he struggled. And I knew that there is some genetic components to that. So I assumed that my daughter would have the same issues. So I went into that experience. I already had the appointments for body work. I already had the appointments for frenectomy. Like I already had everything lined up. So I knew that if she was born and there was issues, that like we had a plan in place and I wasn't going to have to suffer for like 6 months like I did with my son. And so I walked in, and I also had done all of my lactation educator training at that point. So I walked in a lot more confident and knowing a lot more of what to expect. And I was like, hey, at least I'm prepared. Worst case, like she has a tie and things are just as bad. And best case, nothing is wrong and it's a seamless experience. And so that definitely helped having it be my second time around. And sure enough, she had a tie that was worse than her brother. She had like 0 tongue function, and actually it threw me for a loop because she ended up losing weight, which we never struggled with weight with my son. So it then became a whole different ball game, because then she was losing weight and I was like a mess.
Yeah.
And but it did help, because at least things got resolved in like 2 weeks versus it taking 6 months.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
And kind of like wondering what's going on. At least like I knew. I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. We have a plan. We know how to move forward.
Right. And I'm so thankful you brought up tongue ties, because I've heard in the holistic realm, I've definitely been introduced to it more, but I've also seen the other side of like just conventional dentistry and just stuff like that, where if you were to bring that up, it's like tongue ties are just this like woo-woo thing, and like aren't real for adults, doesn't affect your children, whatever. So from a breastfeeding standpoint, can you just touch on, maybe it was your experience with your kids, or just like as you learned more about this, like how big of a role does it play in breastfeeding? Like, is this really the, end all be all, or are there options outside of, just snipping it?
Yes. So tongue ties are like a heated discussion from all fronts. Like you have the more conventional dentistry side and like conventional ENTs, and then who like don't really make them a big deal. Like, no big deal. Like just snip it and you're done. And then you have like, very other end of the spectrum who's like, never get a frenectomy. Like frenectomies are not the answer. And I'm very much like kind of in the middle, where especially from my experience, like, so frenectomies can be a very important piece of the puzzle, because like in the case of my daughter, like she was tethered to the tip of her tongue, like heart-shaped tongue, like could not move. The body work, I mean, maybe could have loosened that fascia, and I'm not super skilled in body work, but like from a mechanical like standpoint, like a physical standpoint, like she needed to release some of that tissue. And now still, even with that tissue getting lasered and removed, like she still struggles with certain issues, like with speech and things like that. And same with my son. So the revision is not the end all be all. And that's what I like moms to know, that it's not as simple as just go get a revision and you're good. There really is, it's a multi-step approach that requires a lot of body work. Like, CFT is great, chiropractic care, craniosacral therapy. So there's a lot of different modalities that like it's a holistic approach really when treating tongue ties. But I don't think it's a one and done, just get a frenectomy. And I don't think that frenectomies are the answer for everyone. In my situation, I am so glad that I did that, because it definitely saved the breastfeeding journey. But the tongue, when you don't have tongue mobility for whatever reason, whether it's a tongue tie or there's just tension or whatever, I mean, the babies they use so many muscles to breastfeed to get a proper suck, to get a proper swallow, the latch, everything. And so if your tongue is not able to move in the mechanics that it needs to move, and your jaw and all that and move in the right ways, then you're not going to get a proper deep enough latch. It's going to cause issues of transfer, weight gain, pain for mom, trauma, nipple trauma for mom, and then all the issues down the road, like speech problems, dental caries, all sorts of things. So they really are a big deal. And it's something to not just dismiss. And it's something to really consider for, when addressing them. So, and I see them a lot, and it's crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with, we're living in the gray. I'm so over this like
Yeah.
black and white ideology when it comes to pursuing health,
Yes.
because ultimately, like, people are going to align with what fits best for their family, and that doesn't mean I have to agree with you.
Right.
And we can still be kind
Right.
and still operate in the same space. But all that being said, I'm just so thankful for your courage to be able to speak on this topic, because it's a very touchy, heated, and as it should be, like, personal topic for so many women.
Yeah.
So I would love to cover the fed is best kind of mindset. Our family is still breastfeeding. My son is almost 2.5, so that has been a long journey, a lot longer than I thought, which I don't take that lightly, because it's been a privilege, but it's also, I wasn't prepared for the noise around it. One being fed is best, and walking with other friends that had different breastfeeding journeys. All of that to say, I was not prepared. So let's start with the noise for fed is best, breast is best, all of just that kind of conversation around this topic.
I saw this question and I was like, I'm like, woo, this is gonna be, we're gonna get open up a can of worms here right now.
Yes.
First of all, congrats on still breastfeeding your child. That's amazing. I love meeting mamas, because I think there is like an aspect of courage, because in society, like, there is people who kind of like look down on people who are breastfeeding their toddlers.
Mm-hmm.
And I breastfed my daughter. I'm still breastfeeding her. I breastfed my son until he was 2.5 through my pregnancy with my daughter.
Yeah.
And you know, you get some comments, which I'm like, I don't care. But so fed is best. So I want to preface this by saying that what I'm going to say is not a judgment to any moms that choose any other means to feed their child. But we really have to take the emotion out of it when we're talking about the optimal nutrition for infants and for babies. Like, that fed is best, fed is the minimum. And that's like saying that, like, to say fed is best is like, you know, to try and compare McDonald's to a grass-fed steak. Like, there's no questioning what is superior in health. But we need to remove the emotion out of it and the judgment out of it. It's not a judgment to say that breast milk is the superior choice of nutrition for an infant. That's a fact. It's a scientific fact. Like, you can't change that. Now, it's a nuanced topic though, right? Because you have to consider mom's maternal health. You have to consider the maternal health of mama. You have to consider other factors. And maybe in that particular dyad, breastfeeding isn't the best option for that dyad. But you can't say that, well, you know, fed is just best, because that's not true, you know? And I know this is a really, like, I might have some people that are mad at me by saying that, but I'm not judging. I'm not saying that if you choose to give formula, or you choose to feed in the bottle feed, whatever, that you're less than, or that you're not a good mom, because it's not about the emotional aspect of it. We're just talking about what is actually best from an infant perspective. So plus, you know, there's so many benefits for moms who breastfeed. There's so many breastfeed, not just even the nutritional component, but the emotional component and the connection and the attachment that comes with baby at the breast. You cannot deny that. So of course, a fed baby is better than a starving baby. Like, let's not be silly. Let's not be silly about that. But yeah, so I really struggle. And then I also struggle with people that, you know, are just very like the opposite and just breast is best, because we do, like I said, we do have to consider the other side of mom's mental health. And sometimes, like, I struggled with postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression severely. It was horrible. And with the breastfeeding struggles, it made the depression worse. And, you know, if it had been any worse, like, it might have been in a place where I would have had to consider not breastfeeding, because it's my mental health, and mom's mental health is just as important for baby. So it's a very nuanced discussion that you can't just blanket say, post on your Instagram, breast is best, fed is best, without really talking about the nuance in there. But from a perspective of what is the superior nutrition for baby, it's breast milk. Like, we can't argue that.
Yes. And no, I've never thought of it that way, of like, fed is the minimum. Nobody wants a hungry baby, especially at that stage. They're just angry, you know?
Right. No one wants that.
But that's just like a good point to take the emotion out of it, because this is just emotionally charged conversation, as it should be. You know, like it's a very intimate, emotional component entering into motherhood. But I'm just so glad that you were able to touch on that, because it kind of leans into just some of the misinformation, because we'll circle back around to it. But I do want to comment that since we're talking about the nutritional profile of breast milk, is there an expiration date of the nutritional profile of breast milk? Because when I went in to see our pediatrician at 1 year, she was not happy that we were still going to continue to nurse, because of course at 12 months I'm going to cause cavities, and he needs everything that he could get nutritionally from food.
It just magically, they turn 12 months and it just magically loses all benefits. Like just 12 months, like 1 year, it's just gone. I heard people say like that their pediatrician was like, it's basically water.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah, mine did not, but I have heard. So yes, that's
absurd.
So the beautiful thing, can we get like a little sciencey here for a minute? Because I geek out on breast milk. So
go for it.
The amazing thing about breast milk is that breast milk changes in composition constantly to meet the needs of your baby. So the incredible thing, so I don't know if you've ever had to pump and bottle feed, but for mamas that like when I returned to work, I, did pump and bottle feed for the times that I was at work. And the crazy thing is, so you don't ever have to increase the amount in ounces that you are giving your baby. And at the breast, they don't increase their intake from 1 month through beyond, through however long they're nursing, because your breast milk changes in composition to meet the needs of the baby. So if a baby's being formula fed, they go up in ounces every month. So they'll start, because it's the same formula. So they'll go up, they'll start maybe 1 month, at 1 month old, they'll be at, 2 ounces. At 2 months old, they go up to a 3 ounce bottle. And by like 8 months, they're drinking like a 9 ounce bottle, because they need that increase in nutrition from the formula. But breast milk, babies stay at around 3 ounces of feed, and that's an average, but it's around 3 ounces of feed from 1 month and for the duration of their breastfeeding, because our breast milk changes in composition. So it's really incredible. So my whole point in saying that is, after a year, your body just continues to create the milk that your child needs, and their needs change after a year, but the nutritional value of your breast milk doesn't change after a year just because your baby turned 1. It is just as nutritious. It is just as important. Is it necessary if like a mom wants to stop breastfeeding after 1? Like, is the baby still going to thrive and survive and function? Yes. Is the recommendation to breastfeed until 2? Yes. Even the WHO, who I have a lot to say about, recommends breastfeeding until the age of 2 and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah. The recommendation is to breastfeed until age 2 and beyond, as mutually desired by mom and baby.
Wow, that's awesome. I think that's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah. So even these people agree that breastfeeding should continue until age 2, because there are still so many benefits for baby and mom.
Yeah, which I just think back to, like, that was one of the things I was able to hold on to early postpartum as we're going through, like, my son, got congested, like just the first year of learning him and my new body, and sicknesses came up. We had the eye goop, all the things. So like everybody's like, breast milk on everything.
Yeah, it's breast milk on it.
I think it does work for that reason. But that was one of the things that I was able to internalize and find peace in, was, okay, if I'm doing nothing else right now, I know that my son is being fed well and what he needs.
Yes.
And if he's sick and I'm still nursing, like when all the COVID waves came through and I wasn't feeling great, he wasn't feeling great, but we were still nursing, that was the only consolation. I was like, okay, we're getting what he needs. We're not going to pop a Tylenol or anything else, because ultimately the Lord designed our bodies for me to be able to do this, and we'll be okay.
Yes.
But I think in transition, what would be some of the early encouragements you would give to moms? Just that early postpartum fog, I think, as they try and navigate breastfeeding.
Yeah. I mean, definitely have someone like support. Have someone in your corner, whether that is a friend who has breastfed, successfully and is really supportive of breastfeeding. And I'm always a big proponent of having a professional in your corner, if you have access to that, and just having that preparation so that you have that person to call when you're like, what's going on? Because even someone like me who had been super like researched and knowledge, like had like felt like I had all the knowledge, like the second my baby came, it was gone. Like
Yep.
mom, like
Goes out the window.
emotional mom brain took over, and I'm like studying my child, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, is he okay? And my husband's like, Lindsay, like, you like, what's going on with your brain? And I'm like,
Yeah.
it just goes. And so having that like grounded person that can speak like knowledge and like just like speak the truths over you is so important. And just that encouragement, like just even aside from breastfeeding, just moms like in those early postpartum days, it is going to get better. If you feel like you're in the thick of it, and whether that's with breastfeeding or the sleeplessness or whatever, like it gets better. It really does. And I'm 4.5 years into my motherhood journey, and the hard changes, but it's nothing like the hard from, at least so far, from those early days. Like those early days are just when you're just trying to get your bearings and learn who this human is. You're trying to, recover from if you had a long labor, and, just whatever, the pregnancy, everything, like it's such a delicate and vulnerable and raw time, and it gets better. Like you will see the other side if you are in the thick of it and struggling.
Yeah. A village. I think I've never really understood like the weight of what that really means for women, because I think that we wouldn't have to fight postpartum mental illness as much as we do in our current society if we had more support and just more capacity to build villages for our families.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is one thing, like as a military family, I'm anxious about. We're moving around every couple of years, and it's like, okay, like that needs to be our first priority, because if we're going to get pregnant and have a baby, like I have to have people in my corner.
Right.
So I'm so thankful that you share that. And one of my questions is, even personally, again, I err on the holistic, more crunchy side of things because of my experience, especially with pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Can the hospital be a conducive place to learn breastfeeding? I didn't even know I could bring in and maybe from a nursing perspective too, you can speak into this, but I remember telling my friend that was a labor and delivery nurse that I didn't even know I could bring my pump to a prenatal appointment so that they could walk through my pump with me. I'm sitting there at home looking at YouTube videos after he was born, because I was like engorged, like what, know?
Right.
And I had one person during my mother baby stay that was like, hey, like, do you have any questions? I'm like, I don't know what I don't know. So that's all to say is like, can the hospital be a conducive place to learn? And what things should we ask for if we are in that environment?
So, it's hard. So my first son, my son was born in a hospital setting, and my daughter was born at home. And I think that having had both experiences, like, I think that either way, whether you're birthing at home or in the hospital, you still have to advocate for yourself and for your baby regardless. And my midwives were great, but from a breastfeeding perspective, that wasn't like a guaranteed, at least my midwives, like, it wasn't like, here's this breastfeeding support. Maybe because I was a second time mom. But it wasn't like there was additional classes, or they didn't go over all that. And again, maybe it was because I already knew, and I was like, my mom had already had that background. But so I don't think that, at least most of the hospital breastfeeding classes that I'm familiar with, I don't think that they're very helpful. So I definitely think finding a different type, a more comprehensive breastfeeding course is a better idea than relying on the hospital-based prenatal breastfeeding courses. And then in terms of after the hospital, so yes, I think, to answer your question, yes, I think it can be a conducive environment. I think there's some factors that make it more challenging. the constant interruptions, that they typically don't really allow baby to be in bed with you. I mean, you can do what you want, but they're going to tell you otherwise, and encourage baby to be somewhere else, things like that. But it also depends, again, nuance, because it also depends where you give birth. So some hospitals have what's called a baby friendly designation. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay, so and it's actually like an initiative it's a national initiative that they're trying, like more and more hospitals are becoming baby friendly. And basically what baby friendly designation means is they're trying to support the breastfeeding dyad in these baby friendly institutions. So I gave birth at a baby friendly institution. So some of the things that are non-negotiables, like you don't even have to ask for on your birth plan or your postpartum plan. They do not give formula. They don't do like artificial like nipples. They don't do like things like that. So they won't give formula. They are proponents, like they will do golden hour. So immediate skin to skin. They will do whatever you need to facilitate that first latch within the first hour. Delayed bathing. So all the things that we know, delayed assessments, all the things that we know that can interrupt that initial latch and the breastfeeding, they do all the things to support to support it. So again, it depends where you're birthing, right? So, but there are lactation consultants, there are IBCLCs at most hospitals. They make rounds, and I didn't have a great experience with mine. I kept saying something's wrong. And they just kept telling me, no, it's fine. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. And so again, I don't know, was that the institution? Was that the particular consultant? Like, what was it? But I know that I kept saying something's not right. And it was just like, just shove them on. So
okay, yeah.
So again, kind of a nuance. I think it can be, but I think moms need to know what to ask for. And I think that, pump education, knowing how to latch, knowing what the proper positions are, like how to get in a comfortable position. What are the things that can impede a good latch? What are the red flags? What are the things to look out for? And I think moms don't realize it's not supposed to hurt. And so they're like sitting there like grinning and bearing it, and they don't say anything because they don't know it's not supposed to hurt. And so I think, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. And that's why I'm just such a huge proponent of prenatal breastfeeding education before baby comes, getting a comprehensive class.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive into some of those misconceptions because it definitely hurt. And I did all my own research. We even took my son to the hospital for a lactation consultant afterwards because I was like, I'm suffocating him with my milk, and he's got this like reflux. I'm like, am I doing something wrong?
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of that is just like, I was a new mom, and trying to figure this out. But a lot of it was like, I didn't know what I didn't know. But I also, in none of my appointments, had anybody say, hey, like, do you know how to use your pump? Do you, so what are some of the misconceptions about breastfeeding that are just, like you said, those staple red flags to watch for from the beginning?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I think reflux, a lot of babies are refluxy. Like reflux is it's not normal. And like doctors are so quick to put, kids on meds, like a 3-month-old on Zantac or because they have reflux. So reflux would be a huge red flag. Pain for mom, like I don't like what people are going to say what they're going to say. Like it should not hurt. If it hurts, it doesn't mean that there's a tongue tie or some big thing. It just means the latch is shallow or the latch is not right. And you just need to optimize it and get into a better position, but it shouldn't hurt. Breastfeeding should not hurt. It might be in the first couple of days a little uncomfortable because it's a new sensation. Like, most people's nipples aren't getting used like that. And you might feel like a gentle tug, but like that's what it should feel like. And I remember the first time that I felt what breastfeeding should feel like, I was like dumbfounded because I had been dealing with constant pain and I was like, what?
Whoa.
I was like, this is what it feels like. And I'm like, oh, I could do this forever. Like, this is no big deal. Like, whereas before I was like, I can't do this forever. Like, this is not forever, but for as long as we need to. So yeah, pain is a huge one. Reflux, gassiness, like excessive gassiness. If your baby, that colic, which colic is not a diagnosis, which I'm sure It's a catch-all term because people don't know what's going on, but it usually refers to an excessively gassy baby, and that's why they cry, because they're in pain. So a lot of times babies that are gassy, you'll kind of see them like arching and like grunting a lot, and they hyper like extend their back. And they're like arching, and people are like, oh, it's so cute, they're trying to roll over. And I'm like, no, your 1-month-old isn't trying to roll over. They're so uncomfortable. They're trying to stretch because they're uncomfortable. So that's another red flag, that they're gassy. Again, all these things don't necessarily mean they're tongue-tied, but these are warning signs of a potential tongue-tie. But it's something to look into. Like, this isn't normal. When the milk dribbles out the side of the mouth, when they're nursing, if milk's dribbling out the side, latching and relatching, popping on and off the breast, that's a red flag. The choking and sputtering on milk, that can be just mom has an oversupply and that just needs to get regulated. That's not something that's like super concerning, but if it continues over time, like after 6 weeks, when mom's supply should be regulated, then that would be something to look into. So there's quite a bit that I think people just write off as like, oh, this is normal, like, oh, look, the milk dribbling down the side, how cute. And it's like, well, no, actually,
no.
Not.
And these markers should continue like throughout the duration of your breastfeeding journey. So I'm thinking, okay, my son is not an infant, we're in the full chaos toddler stage. Should I still be looking for those markers, or do those progressively change?
So generally, like, if your child does well, like in the early stages of breastfeeding, you don't really run into issues. And then maybe you have your child is 8 months old and you've never had pain and you've never had any of these issues. And then one day your 8-month-old is like all of a sudden your latch really hurts and you're like, what's going on? Like, what, like, did we miss a tongue tie or did we miss something?
Right.
No, like those one-off things like that, could be usually related to teething or maybe illness. Oftentimes teething, their latch changes when they're teething. But like, if you've gone this long without issues and then all of a sudden there's something, like, you wouldn't need to be continually like looking for that. Those are more like in the early days things to watch out for.
Okay, that's good to know. So how does teething change breastfeeding? Is it a huge difference? Is it just, my son was extra cranky sometimes?
Yeah.
But
so yeah, teething is fun. Well, so for a few reasons. One, they're uncomfortable. So they're going to want more comfort, right? They're going to want more comfort from moms. They're going to nurse more. So moms might experience some pain and discomfort around when a child is teething because their nipples are getting used more. Also, baby's mouth is hurting because they're teething, and so their latch can change because they're uncomfortable. Like, imagine if you had like dental surgery and then you were like trying to like drink something or like eat something.
Right.
Like, you would kind of be like chewing or like, drinking weird. It would, because you're like uncomfortable, like, what's going on? This hurts. So it can actually change their, like, the way that they're latching and sucking because they're uncomfortable. And then also when babies are teething, their saliva changes a little bit, and that can cause some irritation on the nipple for mom.
Wow. That's super helpful.
So that can continue. So even like if your toddler is getting their molars, like, know that yes, like all of a sudden you could be like, wait, why is this hurting all of a sudden? And then also once they get teeth too, or even before they get teeth, when they're teething, sometimes they also bite, because how when kids are teething, they have that the desire to like gnaw on things. So your nipple could be the byproduct of that thing. Yeah. So that's the other reason why they could hurt.
That conversation with so many other mamas of like, how do you deal with the first bite? And I'm just like, well, it was not great for me, so I reacted more than he reacted.
It's not fun, and every mom is like, yes, I know that.
Should your breastfeeding foundation be established before baby is born? Like, that would be ideal, right?
Yes.
Versus in those early postpartum stages when you're already feeling all the things.
Yes, 100%. So that was the heart behind what I created with Latched, was that I wanted to be I wanted to offer the prenatal education side, because that was what I felt had made the biggest difference for me. Because if I had gone into the birth with my son and my breastfeeding experience with my son not having that class with my lactation consultant prior, I probably would have given up because I wouldn't have known. I would have been in the throes of like my postpartum period and just been like totally a mess. And I wouldn't have known any different. I wouldn't have like, I would have be having to figure out who to call. Like, it's just like so hard. Like, there's so much going on that it's like, then I'd have to be like looking online and reading reviews. And so to have all of that established prior when I'm like able to like put my like full brain into it, and like take the emotions out and take the heat of the moment out, that's what I truly believe saved my relationship, that and just determination. I was like, I'm not quitting. But I mean, I very well could have, because I wouldn't have known that was like not normal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is, like, I think that's an imperative foundation, whether that's a class, whether that's making sure that you have your own research done, but that should be like, I think the number one. We spend so much time researching car seats and strollers and, non-toxic baby gear and all the things. Like, we need to make sure that moms, like that you, if you're having a child, that you are researching, you're putting more emphasis into breastfeeding knowledge and education if you want to breastfeed.
For sure. So where does nutrition play into this conversation as well? So is it the prenatal nutrition across the board? We know is super important. It lays the foundation for your body, your baby's whole body. Yes. But where does the nutrition conversation play a role in breastfeeding, especially in those early postpartum days as well?
Yes. So this is something that is interesting and something that I had been researching, because I was curious about this. I was curious about, if moms got sick and their calories decreased or what would happen to the supply. And this is not going to be an encouragement for moms to go on a crash diet or anything like that. But okay, our bodies are so incredible that the priority is baby. When baby's here and you're breastfeeding, priority becomes baby. So at a detriment to moms, your body will leach from mom's bones, from mom's blood, from all of mom's stores to provide a nutritionally complete meal for baby in the breast milk. So what that means is that this isn't good for moms, because if you are starving, whether for whatever reason, you can still feed your baby, which is incredible, but then you are at risk for postpartum, depletion and all, mineral balances, like in nutritional deficiencies for yourself, which is obviously not ideal. But I see so often that I say this because I see so often when moms are struggling with their milk supply, their first thing is, I'm going to go chug a bunch of water, or I'm going to go chug a bunch of body armor drinks, and I'm going to go eat a whole bunch of calories. And that is not always the answer. And I feel like when we let moms think that, oh, you can just, go eat some more food and your milk supply is going to go up, that's doing a huge disservice, because that's likely not the cause of the low milk supply. So, I think that's super interesting to know that you can still breastfeed your baby even with poor nutrition, and your body will still give your baby all of the nutrition that it needs, because it will just rob your body of it. With that being said, we want to do what's optimal, right? So, yes. So nutrition is super important so that mom can stay in optimal condition so that we can be functioning, because postnatal depletion can lead to all sorts of have health implications for mom. And we want both to be existing. So that means that mom needs to be eating an extra 500 calories while she's breastfeeding, because breastfeeding takes around 500 calories for your body to go through the process of creating breast milk. So mom needs to be eating an extra 500 calories to support her body. She needs to be drinking adequate hydration just to thirst. You don't need to chug 5 gallons of water. Actually, excessive water intake can actually decrease breast milk supply. So we don't want to be chugging gallons and gallons of water. So drinking, mineral, hydrating drinks. So adding electrolytes to your water, electrolyte packets, salt, pinch of salt, whatever. And making sure you're drinking to thirst with that. I always tell mamas just to have a water bottle filled with your electrolytes, like a large, whatever, your Stanley Cup, your Simple Modern, whatever side you're on of the debate, and just keep that with you at all times. And you're just drinking the thirst. And then that you want to be eating like well-rounded, well-balanced meals so that you're replacing what your body is using to feed your baby so that you can be in the best condition for your child.
Absolutely. And I think I recently talked to Caitlin Fusco from the Happy Home Birth podcast, and she was saying,
I love her.
And I've heard it so many times of just like, oh, well, baby will take from mom. But at some point, if mom doesn't have it, then what?
So that is the thing. So like moms like in third world countries, like, or, even just moms here that are super depleted. Yes. So at some point, that is the thing. Yes. At some point, yes, baby will take and take and take and take from mom. But if mom is not replenishing those stores at all, then yes, at some point that will decrease the nutritional, the nutritional, what's the word I'm looking for? The goodness of the milk. So yes, it will decrease that for sure. Absolutely. And then your supply will decrease. So
yeah. Which I think the common question, or I think about like, what was the number one thing I like looked up postpartum was like how to increase milk supply. So how would you speak to that aside from like, I think the first response for anyone is convenience. So supplementation comes into that. But I think that had I known, hey, I don't have to drown myself in water because I thought I was overhydrating, thinking that like, oh, like that has a direct effect on my milk supply.
Right.
What are other ways that we can naturally have a healthy and bountiful milk supply outside of, popping all the pills and drowning ourselves in water?
Right. So the number one way to ensure that you will have a plentiful milk supply is to latch baby frequently and ensure that baby has an effective latch and is moving milk effectively. That is the secret. That is the secret sauce for milk supply. Milk supply is hormonally driven initially, but then it's supply and demand, meaning the milk out is the milk that's going to be made. So it's a simple like equation.
Yeah.
There are obviously things to consider in the health of mama that could impact milk supply beyond supply and demand. So thyroid issues that can cause low milk supply. Insufficient glandular tissue, which is very rare. I think it affects like less than 10% of moms, where they just don't have enough glandular tissue to create the milk and to store the milk. So they're going to have there's nothing they can do to increase their milk supply because they don't have the storage capacity. But that's very rare. And then I think there's other like hormonal issues. Like I believe PCOS, I'm not as well versed in that, but there's other reasons like maternal health reasons that a mama couldn't. But from a standpoint, if mom is in good health, doesn't have thyroid issues, doesn't have like hormonal issues, didn't go on birth control after, that's another huge factor. Then it is supply and demand with an effective latch. So those are reasons that you'd want to, if mama is having a really low milk supply, you'd want to look at, is baby effectively removing and transferring the milk? Because that could be a factor. But I do want to say that a lot of moms are just so scared that they're not making enough milk. So the first question I ask moms when they say, I don't think I'm making enough milk, I ask them, why do you think you're not making enough milk? What is your baby doing? Or what's happening in your body that makes you think that you're not making enough milk? And a lot of times they'll say, oh, I don't, like they'll say something where I'm like, that is normal. Like that's an expected outcome. That's an expected response. And so I think a lot of times there's a fear because our desire as moms is to provide for our children, right? And like breastfeeding is like, I feel like how we do, like we are nourishing our child from our body, and there's so much like put into that I know I did, and I see it a lot, that we're just so scared that it's not. And so I think just getting rooted in the fact that we are enough, like for our children, and that we can provide them with what they need nutritionally, and just like resting in that, can be like very soothing, and just like stop, breathe, like you are enough for your child today.
Yes, absolutely. And I was actually going to even transition to that because I'm so glad that we addressed bringing the emotional component out of choosing how to feed your baby. But I think we also have to acknowledge, like, there is the emotional component.
Yeah.
So how would you speak to the mamas that are in the grief stage of, oh, I desired to breastfeed for any number of reasons, was not, could not, or did not get as, quote, as far as I thought was, I was supposed to go, all the supposed to or shoulds. How would you just speak to the grief or the disappointment in navigating breastfeeding sometimes?
I think that that's a hard one, especially for the moms that really desired that really wanted to. And I know that would break my heart and it would be devastating. And I think that, yes, like, not to diminish that desire, like, that's an amazing, noble desire to want to breastfeed your child. But I just think that just like breathing and knowing that you did what you could and that you're not less of a mom for not feeding your child in the way that you had hoped to. And it doesn't change anything about who you are to your baby and what you can provide your baby. And it doesn't say anything about who you are as a mom. And that's not to diminish the sadness and the grief. Like, sit with that, like, honor that grief. But just know that it doesn't impact your worth as a mom.
Oh, Lindsay, that was perfectly said. I am so thankful that I was able to share this space for you. Where can our community get plugged in with you? What services do you offer? Where can we connect?
Thank you. It was so fun. I could talk about this all day. It was so nice to connect with you. So I do have an Instagram, Latched Lactation Co. I have not posted on there in a while because I just, me and the Instagram.
So we have one more closing question that we close for all of our guests. So if you could provide any wisdom to your younger self or for our community that is listening, what would you share?
This is a good one. I think just slow down. Slow down. We are in like such a day and age where life is just moving and it's moving fast. And there's so much vying for our attention everywhere we turn. And we just need to slow down and just focus on what truly matters. And that might look different for you or for me, but just what matters and just slow down.
That was so perfect. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay. I've so enjoyed having you on the show.
Oh my gosh, this is so fun. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that we got to have this conversation. I'm so honored.
Absolutely. Well, I'll get everything to you guys in the show notes, and we will see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, friend. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you don't want to miss any wisdom or encouragement, be sure to subscribe to the show. And don't forget to rate and review. Your feedback means so much and helps our community grow. If you're looking for more wellness wisdom and free resources, head over to livingwiselywell.com or get connected with me on Instagram at wiselywell. And if you're looking for a break from the hurried health lifestyle, check out my Return to Rest resource for tangible ways to slow down and finally find rest.